The Neo Geo CD games were released in normal CD cases. This is an English version of a Neo Geo CD game. This is Aero Fighters 3. The series is called in Japan Sonic Wings, so if this would be the Japanese version of the game, it would be called Sonic Wings 3. Now, typical for CD games that were also released like this one, you have the cover art, which is also, of course, the manual. Then here you have the CD, and on the back you had some screenshots and a little description about the story of the game, or maybe of the game itself, what this game is all about. Now, this was an English version of a game. This is a Japanese version of a game. This is Crossed Swords. And yeah, the Japanese games were released or sold with those spine cards. I never understood the reason for those spine cards, but yeah, the Japanese games were released with those spine cards. And of course also the CDs inside, and on the back again you have the screenshots and a little description about the game, which I can't read because I don't speak or read the Japanese language. And also something interesting is that some games have on the top right here the Neo Geo logo on it. This one, this doesn't have the Neo Geo logo on it, sorry. First I thought, maybe it's because it's an English version of the game that only in Japan they released games with this Neo Geo logo on it. And another idea that I had was that maybe the previous owner changed the top part of the CD case because it was too scratched, or one of the flaps might have been broken off or anything. But I actually have a sealed Japanese game for the Neo Geo CD, this one, King of the Monsters 2, and as you can see here, it also has the spine card, but it also misses the Neo Geo logo on it. So yeah, in the end I actually don't know how many games or which games had the Neo Geo logo on them. Maybe the first games that were released for the system had the Neo Geo logo on the top right of the CD case, and at some point they stopped making those CD cases with the Neo Geo logo on them, and all the games that were released afterwards didn't have that Neo Geo logo on them. But anyways, I just wanted to mention it. For the Neo Geo CD, 97 games were released for the Neo Geo CD. On the Neo Geo AES there are 117 games officially released, and on the MVS there were 148 games released officially. So as you can see, this is also, let's call it a drawback if you are an owner of a Neo Geo CD, that not that many games were released for the Neo Geo CD compared to the other systems, but it's still a big number, and there were some awesome games released also for the Neo Geo CD, and actually 8 out of those 97 games were exclusively released just for the Neo Geo CD. And I actually only have one of those games, and this is this one. This is Crossed Swords 2, the sequel to Crossed Swords 1. And yeah, this is also a very cool game, and yeah, we're gonna take a look at those games in a minute. There's still some other things that I wanted to talk about before we come to some gameplay. One cool thing / one advancement of the Neo Geo CD / the Neo Geo CD games is actually that you have the soundtrack of the games right on the CD, and you can play them on the Neo Geo CD, or if you want you can actually insert the games into a normal stereo system and listen to the soundtrack of those games. For a lot of the Neo Geo AES games, they also released soundtracks on CDs, which you could also buy, and you can still buy them on eBay or other auction sites, or maybe even some stores. But in the end, if you are an owner of a Neo Geo CD and you have the games, then you also have the soundtrack right on the gaming disc. There's only one game that I have which actually doesn't have a soundtrack on it, and this is this one. This is Puzzle Bubble, and yeah, for some kind of reason the game doesn't have the soundtrack on the CD. But except for that, every game that I have and I've seen so far also has the complete soundtrack on the CD. And one other advancement of the Neo Geo CD games is because they were released on CD, they also had a better audio quality. So the games actually have CD audio quality / studio quality. This is also one advancement of the Neo Geo CD games. I've read online that actually some people said that the picture quality is better, but I don't think this is actually true or anything. I know with the sound quality it is true, but I don't think that actually the graphics are improved on the Neo Geo CD. And in some games on the Neo Geo CD it can happen that you actually have some extra material on them, like for instance a picture gallery or something like that, or sometimes you actually have a specific or an extra game mode on it, but I actually can't think of any game that I have that actually has an extra mode or anything. But yeah, some games actually have something extra on the CD. Okay, yeah, one last thing before we actually come to the games is that I really wanted to give you a comparison, and also I wanted to give you two examples of the loading times. And those examples are this game. This is Last Blade 2. This is a fighting game. And Crossed Swords 2, the sequel to Crossed Swords 1. Crossed Swords 2 is actually a small game, or one of the smaller games. This one has 70 megabits. And the Last Blade 2 is actually one of the bigger games that were released for the Neo Geo, and this one has 554 megabits. This is also something that I think it's actually interesting that they didn't mention the size of the games anymore on the Neo Geo CD games, because also, like I mentioned in part 1, the size of the games were always highlighted on the Neo Geo AES on the cover. And what I also mentioned in part 1 is that it depends on the game / on the size of the game, how long the loading times are, and it also depends what kind of game you are actually playing. So in Crossed Swords 2, as you're gonna find out, it loads the game, then you come into the main menu, then you start the game, it will load again, so you get the intro of the game, and then it will load again, and then you can play the game. And only if you reach the end of the level, it will load again. For fighting games it's a little different, and those are actually the games where I can relate / where I can see that people don't like the system, because yeah, in fighting games, number one, because they are pretty big in terms of the size of the game, and also because they load a lot. When you insert the CD, it will load, then you come into the main menu, then it will load again, then you can choose your character, then it will load again, then you see your opponent, then it will load again, then you will see an introduction of your opponent, and then it will load again, and then you can actually play the game / you can fight your opponent. But in the end, during those fights or between the rounds, it also will not load or anything. Just if you won or lost the fight against this opponent, then it will start loading again. So this is what I'm gonna show you next. I give you the two examples of those loading times, and I will also show you all the three systems in action at the same time, so that you can see how much are differences in the loading times. And I've also tried to do my best in terms of timing, so that I would take the same amount of time for skipping scenes or picking my character or anything. Okay, but next we're gonna take a look at those loading times.
行くぞ。あなたを。
真剣勝負一本目始め。二本目始め。
悪く思うな。
So now we come to the games. I know, finally. And like always in my system reviews, I wanna show you many games for the system to give you a nice variation so that you can see what kind of games are available for the system. And I have here 3 piles of games, and this is almost my entire collection of games that I have for the Neo Geo CD. Now, like always, also in my system reviews, since I'm gonna show you now many games, I only talk very briefly about those games, so I'm not gonna review any of those in more detail or anything. And I also wanna apologize in advance because I know that I'm gonna repeat myself while talking about all those video games, especially in terms of graphics, music and sound effects. Okay, but let's start with the first game, Last Resort. Last Resort is a side-scrolling space shooter. It's actually like R-Type, so in the end, if you like games like R-Type, then Last Resort is definitely one game that you should check out, slash that you can't really go wrong with. In this game, of course, you defend yourself against hordes of enemy. You're also gonna encounter some mini bosses during the levels, and at the end of each level you also fight boss characters, and you also collect some power-ups throughout the game. Yeah, so like I said, it's a space shooter in the style of R-Type. I think it's actually a pretty cool game. The graphics are very nice, and also I like the soundtrack of the game, and also the sound effects are actually pretty cool. And also, like I mentioned before, if you like side-scrolling space shooters or any kind of space shooters, then you can't really go wrong with Last Resort. Now, the next game is The Next Glory Super Sidekicks 3. The third part of the Super Sidekicks series. This is a soccer game. And to be honest, it's a long time since I've played a soccer game on a computer or on a video game system. Before I made this review, I never played this game actually, because yeah, I'm not anymore a sports game fan, let's call it like that. I've played a lot of sports games back in the days, but it's been a long time since I really wanted to play another soccer game or whatever. But when I recorded this footage, I actually have to say it's a really cool game, and what I really liked about this game was that it was fast action in the end. So it's just how I would imagine a soccer game should be on an arcade system. It's fast, it's got a great presentation for a soccer game, in my opinion. It's got a cool soundtrack. The sound effects, I really like the sound effects. Actually, they remind me more of a fighting game actually, or a beat 'em up game, but they are also pretty cool. And yeah, I also like the graphics and the whole atmosphere of the game. In this game you can choose one of 30 teams, and in the end, yeah, if you want, you can play the World Cup and try to become the world champion in soccer. I think it's a cool game. I was pleasantly surprised, and I would really recommend this game. It's actually pretty cool. Now, the next game is Fatal Fury Special. And Fatal Fury Special is a fighting game, a one-on-one fighting game, and this is one game out of the Fatal Fury series. Fatal Fury started shortly after Street Fighter 2 came out in the arcades by Capcom, and this was the first fighting game from SNK back in the days. And because Street Fighter 2 was so successful and started a new arcade boom in 1991, a lot of companies started with their version of Street Fighter / created their own fighting games, like for instance Midway with Mortal Kombat, and also SNK and the company ADK, which was one of the third-party developers for the Neo Geo, made all kinds of fighting games. There were the Art of Fighting series, the Fatal Fury series, the World Hero series, then the Samurai Spirit series / Samurai Shodown series, because Samurai Spirit is the Japanese version of Samurai Shodown, and also later on the King of Fighters series. So there were a lot of fighting games, of course, also on the Neo Geo. To be honest, I never played Fatal Fury that much. I've played a lot of Street Fighter 2, but yeah, I never was that interested in the Fatal Fury series. I know it's a great game / a great series, and if I'm not mistaken, Fatal Fury, not this game right here, Fatal Fury Special, but Fatal Fury was one of the first, or maybe even the first game where the female character had a bouncing bosom, or better let's say her top moved with her movements. Let's call it like that. In the end, I think the Fatal Fury series, or better let's say this one, Fatal Fury Special, it's a cool fighting game, I know, but I never got really into those games. It's got great graphics, also a cool soundtrack, great sound effects, and what's also interesting about the Fatal Fury games is that in the stages you can fight either in the foreground or in the background, so you can fight in two different levels. So in the end, like I said, I know it's a great game and I can easily recommend it to other fighting fans, but for me, like I said, I never got really into that series. Okay, but now let's continue with the next game. Top Hunter, Roddy and Kathy. This is a side-scrolling action game slash jump-and-run game where you walk around and you can either beat up your opponents, then you can also extend your arms and in the end grab your enemies and either throw those enemies at other enemies or just throw them right out of the screen. Then in this game, you collect a lot of gems for extra points so that you get more points for your high score / get more lives for your character. You can also collect extra powers so that your character is super strong. Then you can also pick up some weapons and use those. There are also some vehicles in this game, like a mech or whatever this is. In this game you also have a foreground area and a background area, so also two levels that you have to switch in order to progress throughout the game, and at the end of each level you also fight the boss character and you also have a little indicator that tells you how far the end boss is away in this level. It's also a nice game. Very colorful and cute animation / graphics. The music is nice and also the sound effects. And in the end, I would recommend it to every jump and run fan / action fan. It's actually not that bad. Okay, next we come to Overtop, and Overtop is the only racing game that I have for this system. You play this game in kind of an isometric view. You can select at the beginning of the game one of many vehicles. Actually, there are a couple of vehicles available. It's very similar to the game Neo Drift Out, also a game for the Neo Geo. But the difference was in Neo Drift Out you drove around with rally cars, and in this game it's more like your everyday cars or street cars actually. There are sports cars like for instance a Lamborghini Diablo, then also a Ferrari, then also a truck as far as I remember correctly, and some other cars / some smaller cars are also in this game. But in the end, one thing that I didn't like that much in this game was, for the most part, you actually drive against the clock. I mean, you compete against other cars, but in the end, if you would pick a small car where you know that this car is not as fast as a Lamborghini, you don't really drive against other cars because most of the other cars will be faster than you, and in the end, you only drive against the clock. If you choose one of the sports cars, like for instance a Lamborghini or anything, then you might have maybe one computer opponent because the computer picked the Ferrari or whatever, except you drive very badly, then of course the other opponents can also catch up and get in front of you, and But in the end, I think it's also a cool looking game. Also the soundtrack in this game is actually not bad, and also the sound effects are okay. I think also it's an interesting game, but I have to play it a little bit more to get a better impression of this game. But anyways, let's come to the next game. The next game is Magician Lord, and Magician Lord is one of the first games that was released for the system. It's a side-scrolling action game / jump run, and through this game you collect also power-ups and you will change into two other forms. The magician is the weakest form. The second form that you can turn into is kind of a dragon. You can't fly around or anything, but you can breathe fire. The third form is a ninja, and the ninja throws some kind of ninja stars, let's call them like that. Also in this game you have, of course, at the end of each level a boss character. And yeah, it's also a pretty hard game, which I expected. I mean, of course, this game was made for the arcades, so in order to insert more coins into one of those machines, the games were hard back then, of course. I like the graphics, and also the soundtrack and also the sound effects are okay. And in the end, it's definitely also one game that I would recommend. It's actually a pretty cool game. Okay, now to the next game. The next one is Metal Slug. Metal Slug is also a side-scrolling action game / a run and gun game. The Metal Slug series is very well known. It's also a very popular series. And Metal Slug is also one of my favorite games on the Neo Geo CD. It's just a pure awesome game. I mean, the graphics are amazing, all the animations, it has a lot of humor, the music is super cool, and also the sound effects are very, very good. Also the tank, the Metal Slug, which can jump and crawl, is very cool. Also, of course, in this game, at the end of each level you fight a big boss character. Sometimes you also have some mini boss characters during the levels, and I guess many people already know about the Metal Slug series, so I don't really have to recommend this game for them. But whoever doesn't know about the Metal Slug series, you have to try this game. It's so cool and so great. One game that I would of course highly recommend for the system, and really cool. There's nothing more that I can add to this game. Okay, now to the next pile, and ta-da! We have Metal Slug 2, the sequel. Only Metal Slug 1 and Metal Slug 2 were released on the Neo Geo CD. Metal Slug 2, the graphics, sound and sound effects are also amazing. The game is actually the same like Metal Slug 1, but in the end, why should they change a winning formula? There's only one real difference in Metal Slug 2, and that is that at the beginning of the game you can choose one character out of 4 different characters, but in the end it's almost the same game. Yeah, you also have some new weapons / extra weapons. Then there is this camel with the machine gun on the back, or laser gun, or whatever this is also very funny actually. And of course the game also has a different soundtrack, but it sounds also amazing. But in the end, I also would highly recommend Metal Slug 2 for every run and gun game fan. Okay, now to the next game. Hyper Heroes Battle. This is actually World Heroes Jet 2, and this is also a fighting game. What I really like about this game / the World Heroes series is the characters, because this is the special thing about this fighting game series, that they used characters from the history and placed them in this fighting game. So for instance, you have Rasputin, then Jeanne d'Arc, Eric the Viking, Genghis Khan, and some other characters which are more or less known. I actually like the character Rasputin with his big feet and big hand attacks. I think it's actually cool that they made a fighting game and also kind of a parody of a fighting game, because it's actually pretty funny, the game. At least I think it's actually pretty funny. Also, graphics in this game are also really cool, the music is also cool, and the sound effects are also okay. So this is also a fighting game that I would recommend. It's actually pretty cool. Now to the next game. Next game is Puzzle Bubble, and Puzzle Bubble is a puzzle game in the style of like Tetris actually and Dr. Mario. In the end, what you have to do is you have to try to get 3 balls with the same color next to each other so that they will disappear, and in the end you have to try to clear the whole screen from those color balls or whatever. And you control this small gun on the bottom of the screen, and yeah, that's basically the game. It's a very, very cute game. I like the cute graphics, I like the cute soundtrack, and yeah, if you like puzzle games and Bubble Bubble, then yeah, I guess you also can't go wrong with Puzzle Bobble.